You're listening to the 4-Phase Cycle podcast with your hosts, Dr. Alex and Megan of ZESTY Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you've definitely come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and best friends, we use the 4 phases of the female cycle in combination with functional lab work and mindset practices to transform the lives of the women we work with.
We also have a whole lot of fun along the way. If you're new around here, it's best to start with season 1 before jumping around and plan to roll up your sleeves. Showing up for ourselves and enjoying our lives is what good health is all about. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making changes.
Hi there, this is Dr. Alex here. So happy to have you join me. Today we're going to be talking about trauma brain, and I'm going to be telling you a little story about dogs. Now, if you're like, what the heck do dogs and trauma brain have to do with one another, and what does it have to do with me, you are definitely going to want to stay tuned to this episode because it's kind of a fascinating look at trauma and looking at trauma brain, and it's a good reminder that we need to give ourselves support. So that's what we're heading to. I wanted to take a second to invite you to our 4-day brain health challenge. So there are 2 big categories of people who the challenge is specifically for. Now, you don't have to fit into one of these categories. There's lots of people that this fits for because guess what? The brain runs everything in your body and your life in some way or another. But the 2 groups of people that it's especially important for is if you have a history of either small T or large T trauma, resetting the brain, rewiring the brain, learning to navigate that is going to really change the trajectory of where you are going. And the other group is if you are someone who keeps trying to change what you do in life to get a different outcome and it's not working, either you can't stick with the doingness of it or you're doing all the things but the results aren't happening, you're going to want to come to the challenge. So it's 4 days live with us. And yes, you can get the replays if you can't make it live. It's 4 day live with us, and we are going to dig into so much of the nitty gritty and take you step by step through how we navigate this process. So definitely come check it out. The show notes are going to have the link, but it's zestyginger.com/habit, nice and easy. The other big kind of carrot that we have for participating in the challenge is that the winner of that challenge will win $1,000. And that is just $1,000 to you. That is not like $1,000 tied to anything. So that is the potential to have you win when you join. If you bring a friend, you get a bonus entry. So bring a friend, and just when they sign up, email us their first name and the email address that they used to sign up so we make sure to give you more entries. And there's actually going to be even more ways to participate in the challenge to get more entries for that $1,000. You'll definitely want to come because not only will you understand your brain, but there's that big prize at the end as well to keep you nice and motivated. And yes, if you're wondering if the challenge is all brain based, you can bet your bottom dollar it is, because that is how we set up everything. So if you're ever wondering, is there a method to their madness? The answer is yes. And the answer is that it's brain based. All right, so check that out, zestyginger.com/habit. Okay, so let's talk about trauma brain. And this is one where I wanted to share an illustrating story. This isn't going to be a bunch of sciencey mumbo jumbo about trauma brain, though you know me well enough at this point to know that I will always come in here and interject a lot of nerdiness. But now I wanted to talk about a story illustrating the difference of trauma brain in someone and what that does, and why I believe that the answer to that is more support. Okay. I was on a podcast interview with James Wedmore the other day, and that interview actually just went live this week as well. Mind Your Business podcast if you want to listen to it. And James asked me a really fascinating question that has now there's going to be probably about 6 episodes and a follow up one with him to dig into. But one of the questions that he was asking me of, how do you know the difference between feeling an emotion and feeding it, right? Like how do we not stay in our dark spots? And we've talked about that on here, and there's a lot more coming, like I said. But I think inherent in this question a lot of times is the understanding that it's kind of like calories or movement, that we are more alike than not. Now, in a lot of ways, humans are very alike to one another, and our brains and the things that we deal with, the insecurities, the emotions, yeah, that is kind of the same for all of us in terms of its presence. But I do think where sometimes it can be when you're on the trauma end of things, it can feel like, man, I'm the odd one out because it doesn't work quite the same for me. Or if you're someone who works with people and you're like, sometimes I get this result with people and sometimes I can't get these people there, right? What is the deal with that? So, no matter where you are, or maybe you're watching a good friend or a family member go through it. And so, when we don't totally understand the differences and therefore how it affects our individual toolkits and the level of support we need, I think that's where we can either get into some guilt and shame around why am I like this, or just a general like, I don't really understand how to approach this person. I don't even really know what they need. And that can cause a lot of problems no matter which side of the equation that you're actually on. So, trauma story time. I have had 2 bulldogs in my life. And if you've listened to season 1, you know that in the background, sometimes you hear Whiskey snoring, and that's the first one. And I love those dogs. And the first one that we got, name was Whiskey, and he was a rescue. In that we got him off Craigslist for a family that he had been shuffled around between a couple different families, and they weren't able to make it work, and eventually they were, were rehoming him. And those people were they were nice and all the interactions that I had with them, but the there was a mismatch in styles of what they wanted from a dog and how they wanted to discipline a dog to how Whiskey likely was. So Whiskey was always very active for an English bulldog. So, people get dogs and they're like, oh, they're going to be a certain way, and English bulldogs are pretty chill. Well, Whiskey's very high energy and needs quite a bit of exercise. Like, he has gone stand up paddle boarding with me and hiking and all of that good stuff. So clearly it's like exactly what I needed, which is why he became my dog. But there was some mismatch there, and some of the discipline that he grew up with, we got him at 10 months old, had been clearly traumatizing for him. Okay. Now, it's important to note, I don't think the intentionality was negative. These are not bad people. But there was the end result was that with Whiskey, from the day we got him, and actually to this day, he's still around. You reach for his head, you reach to pat the top of his head, and he'll flinch. In the beginning, it was really, really pronounced. If there was ever loud noises, right? If there was ever banging, if there was yelling, like even for example, in Chicago, our neighbor's house caught on fire one day, and the whole house across the street went down. I mean, it was amazing. This was talk about getting my heart rate up in terms of being in sympathetic drive. But, I'm getting ready for work in the ICU at like 4 a.m. and all of a sudden I notice flames out the window. And, so I started yelling to kind of mobilize everybody. And it was that kind of stuff that, like, of course, I was going to yell in that moment because that's what needed to happen. And I needed to run out and call the police and call into the house and see if anyone needed help and all of that. Luckily, they crawled down from the roof from the second floor and got out, so that was okay. But it was situations like that where normally there's not a lot of yelling, but sometimes life happens, right? And so there's yelling, and that's how he would react. I mean, he doesn't have a tail for, if you know anything about English bulldogs, some of them have tails and some of them don't, but he didn't have a tail, but he would, as if he could, stick his tail between his legs and go running into the corner. So it was things like that that have always caused him to be a little bit different, right? The way that I approach him is a little bit different, and reaching for him, picking up large boxes around him, there's always been a little bit of a change with that. Now, let's contrast this to Max, second English bulldog. Also, actually, off Craigslist because he was the runt of the litter, and apparently no one wanted him, which is perfect because I did. And he was a puppy, right? Like 12 weeks when we picked him up. And that little guy has never, ever had anything happen to him that is like traumatic or scary, and no one has ever raised a hand to him or disciplined him in a scary way or anything like that, right? It's always been a very calm environment. And that dog, to this day, you could come up to him with like a machete and he will be like, "Oh, is that for me? This is just so, I love you so much that it's for me and it's just so great and everything's just, can you please pet me?" Like there is, he even thinks the vacuum cleaner is his friend, right? He thinks everybody wants to be his friend, and he thinks everything is food and toys for him. Both of them are great dogs. Both of them, if you were to meet Whiskey and Max today, you would be like, they're great little guys, right? They're fun, they're playful, they're loving, they're snuggly. All of that is really, really cool. You wouldn't judge them on how they act just because Whiskey had a history of, maybe not the most stable and secure and safe feeling environment as interpreted by his brain. But you would also, and me included, modify behaviors and environments to account for what I know about Whiskey. The what he needs and the support that he gets is independent of his worthiness or of his goodness as a dog. And humans are not any different from that story. And I actually like to have topics that have nothing to do with you, like you weren't identifying with the dog story, so you could really listen along and be like, yeah, I know I'm tracking. Because once it's to you, it's like, oh well, but I'm like this and I messed this up and whatever. Everything that you just inserted that you didn't insert about the dog story, if you applied it to you and made it something more than that, that is all just beliefs and thoughts that are a consequence of the trauma experience, but it is not a reflection of you. That is all just extra. Everything that you were feeling and thinking about the dog story and how you actually probably felt compassion for that scenario, and you'd be like, oh my gosh, I've never met Whiskey, but I absolutely would be quiet for him. You know what I mean? Like most people who, at least dog people, are like, I would do anything for most dogs, right? And so anything that you did not add to listening to that story is more accurate of how we can treat ourselves and those around us. Because at the crux of it, it's kind of like that's what we got imprinted with. And when we love something and we show up for it, we are willing to modify without making that person or that thing wrong, right? And so there's no need for us to not treat ourselves like that or anyone else in our life that we know is dealing with this. That doesn't mean that someone can't get there, right? People who have a trauma story, a trauma history that has left an imprint on their brain, the brain can be rewired. Whiskey has gotten way, way better with time. Right now, it's like an imperceptible, it's only because I know him so well that I notice the little tiny flinch that he has, right? But over time, that has really changed. It's really shifted. Me ignoring his needs for that would have left a scenario where those needs weren't met, therefore he didn't get the support he needed, therefore it would not have gotten better. What he would have felt is, I didn't get what I needed then, and I'm not getting what I need now. No one gets better or wins in that scenario, unfortunately. But when we say, here, it is what it is, and now I'm going to move forward and give myself what I need or what that person needs, then the brain, absolutely, it's neuroplastic. It is rewirable. It can change, and therefore you get to participate in that, and you get to heal or watch someone you love heal or that you're working with heal, right? When we say, this is what it is, and I'm willing to give support, change happens. We all know we're all a little different, but on this, we tend to really hold out. Please think about this as it applies to you or as it applies to the people that you love or work with, and see, while acknowledging the trauma brain, what does support look like? And that's it. I super want to hear what you come up with and what your reaction is. So please screenshot this, tag me in your stories as you share, or come chat with me in the DMs, shoot us an email. However you want to do it is cool, but I'd love to hear from you because this is definitely a topic that we're going to be digging into more and more. Sending you lots of love, and we'll see you in the challenge.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads. And we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting edge information.
If you found these podclasses helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.